Greetings, GameCola faithful, and welcome to the GameCola Podcast. This is podcast number 68. With me today are Nathaniel Hoover, Catherine J., Joseph Martin, and Anna Bryniarski. I gave everyone's full names because I just literally read it off of Skype. Anyway, everyone introduce yourselves.
Hey, I'm Nathaniel Hoover. I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, all over the website, and recently I've been doing a lot for the GameCola YouTube channel, doing a playthrough of the Game Boy Color version of Crystallis, and now the fan-made Mega Man My Little Pony crossover, Mega Pony.
This is Kate J. I do art on occasion for GameCola. I've done The Gates of Life in the past, and yeah, I do odds and ends when I'm asked.
I'm Joseph Martin. I sometimes do reviews, sometimes do fabricated news, and a lot of the time get on podcasts like this, including the fan fiction podcast that I've suddenly forgotten the name of. Hacks and Slash. That's what it is.
Hi, I'm Anna Bryniarski. I was on the podcast the last 2 times, and I did something this month for writing, so that's good.
Yeah, I think you did a review.
I wrote something about 2DS.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, I feel so bad because, Paul, if you ask Paul, who wrote a random article in, 2008, he'll be like, oh yeah, I know that, and I can't even remember what you wrote this month.
Well, it's okay. I can barely remember when I write anything.
But,
if I've written anything.
No, you did definitely write about the 3DS, or the 2DS, sorry. You wrote about the 2DS.
The Tudis Frutis. My brother got a 2DS, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He got it like many people, which was an amazingly good move by Nintendo. They released at the same time they released Pokemon X and Y, so tons of people, including my brother, just bought it so that they could play Pokemon.
Yeah.
A lot of people in Gamers Guild bought them at the same time. I was just like, oh, well, I'm still not in the cool kids.
I've had a chance to hold it and stuff, and it certainly does not feel as awkward as it looks.
Well, that's good.
And they do put the stylus back on the side instead of in the back, which is the thing I disliked about the 3DS more than the low battery life is just that they put the stylus in the back, so I can't just slide it out easily while I'm playing a game. Because with the DS and DS Lite and DSi, you could have your fingers on the buttons and pull out the stylus really easily, with one of your fingers that was below it. I'm holding it right now to describe my 3DS right now to describe it.
We can hear it.
I could use my middle finger to push it out and then grab it real quick and then go straight to that, which was convenient. And then they put it in the back and they made it smaller, and I always feel compelled to pull it out, so everything has to come to a halt, meticulously get out my tiny stylus. And so anyway, that's just a really roundabout way of saying that I get very peeved when I have to use effort to use a stylus.
But you actually use the stylus? You don't actually just use your finger?
Well, now I do. I used to always use the stylus. Now I've lost the stylus and use my finger. But before that, I always used the stylus and kept, I had 5 for my DS because I would always lose them. But now the old ones don't fit in this because they have the little tiny slot. It's just really frustrating.
You could hold the stylus in your mouth like a toothpick, and then it's the access.
I did do that sometimes, but I can't do that all the time because people look at you weird.
I forgot who it was. I mean, maybe it was Paul, but someone was saying on Twitter about how they miss the stylus now that they're using the Vita and it doesn't have a stylus. They never really realized how nice it was to have something that accurately pinpoints what you were pointing at.
Your finger just gets in the way. You don't realize how fat your fingers are until you have to put them in front of a screen.
Yeah.
At least mine. I don't know about I can't speak for other people. But I know that certain mini games, there's a mini game in the Pokemon XY where you tap the Pokemon and they at the correct time and they'll bounce balls of yarn up. It's very cute and adorable, I guess. But I can't see anything because my finger is in front of it all. And with the stylus, I played it with the stylus and it was super easy. And I kept the game going for half an hour. I kept the game going until DS started running out of battery, and then I had to stop.
It's Nintendo's way of telling you it's time to put down the system and go outside.
It didn't have a full charge when I started. but it was a significantly long time. I don't think it was 30 minutes. I think it was probably more like 5, maybe.
How many batteries does a DS take?
I don't know, Jetty. How many batteries does a DS take? I'm sorry, that sounded like a setup to something.
How many GameCola staff members does it take to screw in a light bulb? One to write it, one to edit. I don't know. But I mean, does anyone have an answer?
To what? The DS?
Yeah, how many batteries does it have?
1.
What?
A rechargeable battery. You plug it
Weird.
into the wall like your phone.
That's so weird. No, sorry, like, 'cause I recently had my old Game Boy out, and like next to the old Game Boy was the slightly less old Game Boy, and the slightly less old Game Boy only took 2 batteries, and I remember being like, dude, are we living in the future? How is this possible? That the like Game Boy Color can have colors and only 2 batteries.
I know. I've got my old brick 4 battery Game Boy.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I haven't needed to replace those batteries in like years. I mean, I don't play it as much as, people probably played it when it was the only handheld system. But I mean, I played Pokemon Blue on it for like over the course of a month, and it's still fine. I can just I don't have it with me right now because I'm on vacation, and I don't bring my big Game Boy with me because it's a cinder block.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to pack.
I remember when they made the Game Boy Pocket or whatever, which was basically just like a thinner Game Boy, and it was still like, no one can really fit this in their pocket. Like, it's still a little big.
I bet Nintendo Boy could.
I actually can fit the big cinder block Game Boy into my jacket pockets because they're like gigantic.
Yeah.
And so that's really nice, but it would not fit in a pants pocket at all.
Yeah. I think there was like a promotional image of it being in like a back pants pocket, but it was like still sticking out, which part of the idea was like you can tell what's in the pocket, but the other part is that it doesn't actually fit in your pocket. Just saying.
Yeah.
To go to the other extreme of that, did anyone ever hear of / see the Game Boy Micro when it was a thing?
Game Boy Micro?
That confused the heck out of me. It was a super tiny. That's the Game Boy Advance one that I'm thinking.
It's a game. So there was the Game Boy Advance, and there was the Game Boy Advance SP, which is the cool one that has the flip top. That's the one I like, and that's the one I had growing up.
And then they had the Game Boy Micro, which is like the size of an original NES controller or thereabouts.
I think even smaller. I think it was really small.
So, I mean, the screen has a surprisingly good resolution. It's very sharp. You can actually see everything. But it's incredibly tiny, and it really is the true Game Boy Pocket. But why anyone really needed one of those is beyond me, because the Game Boy Advance SP is really perfect pocket size.
And the DS, I think, had come out at that point. Either had come out or it was like just on the verge. Like the Game Boy Advance SP, or just that whole genre was pretty much going out of style.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't.
I remember it being a very strange timing for it, for something that at no point ever seemed to have been relevant in the first place.
I mean, I've only ever seen one. You could change the cover of it though. Like they came with a bunch of plastic screen covers that you could pop on and off.
Yeah, I'm looking at Google Images.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at too. That is small.
But
yeah, sorry.
I've just heard tons of people say that like they didn't even think it was like a licensed thing. Like they thought it was one of those like weird modded things that someone came up with and distributed. But yeah, Game Boy Advance, man, it was quite the adventure. Interesting.
I never had a Game Boy Advance. Like my most recent Game Boy is the Game Boy Color.
I still am very impressed with the Game Boy Advance. I mean, I'm very much a retro gamer, but I do occasionally play newer games. But what I like about the GBA is that in a time when everything was in 3D and motion controls were just on the horizon, Game Boy Advance was basically portable Super Nintendo. It just continued the kind of gameplay, the kind of graphics, just the level of quality that you found on the Super Nintendo. And I really liked that that kind of gaming didn't just end when polygons were invented.
Game Boy
Yeah, there
Advance.
was one design flaw though, and that it wasn't backlit. That made it really difficult. I mean, you could get
Well,
the
and
little
that's why
snake
this
lights, but
The SP was backlit.
Yeah.
That's the one I
Yeah.
think most everyone had that I was aware of. But it also had the best ports, I think. Like Game
Yeah.
Boy Advance had some amazing ports. Like Yoshi's Island for the Game Boy feels like perfect. Like the control. I feel like it feels better on the Game Boy Advance than it would on an SNES almost. Just because I can't imagine it feeling any better than the way the precision it has on the Game Boy.
When the GBA also had a series of classic games from the NES, the original Legend of Zelda, the original Metroid, the original Castlevania, and it was also great because I think it successfully bridged the gap between modern gamers who were getting their, Pokemon fix, and this is like the first video game I ever played, and then the old school gamers who were saying, I really don't like all of, this funky N64 controller, and I don't want to have to go out and buy a PlayStation, all this other stuff, and, well, hey, I can still play the original Zelda, which I, lost my copy of years ago when I sold my NES. But now I can play this again on a new modern system and maybe pick up a couple other games. So I think they were very successful in catering to all sorts of gamers with the Game Boy Advance.
It's funny because the Game Boy was the Advance SP. It was the first system that I ever had, and the first 3 games I got for it were either ports or remakes of old popular games. That I didn't know that at the time because I didn't know anything because I was 7. But the first game I got was Super Mario Brothers 3, which it was the All-Star version, but it was just that. And I played until I got to the Sun, which is like somewhere in World 2. Then I assumed the Sun was a final boss, and that I didn't want to play the game any further because I got super frustrated with the Sun, so I stopped playing Mario 3 for like years. And I didn't come back to it and beat it for years when I learned that there were 8 worlds and not just 2. But then after that, I got Yoshi's Island, which is my favorite game to date. It was amazing. And then I also got Fire Red, which is the remake of Red and Blue. So it was interesting though, because those were all like old game. They were, not old, but they like were based off of. They were supposed to appeal to, the retro crowd, air quotes.
And one of the neatest things that they did with the Game Boy Advance was actually I'm saying like PlayStation and N64. I have my timing out of whack. It was the turn of the century. So GameCube and PS2 and I think the original Xbox somewhere around there were at the time. And so the Game Boy Advance has a link cable that sold separately, ask parents, that you can hook up to your GameCube to do some really cool stuff. So Metroid Prime, for example, if you have a copy of Metroid Fusion, you link the 2 of them, and I'm trying to remember which direction this is and what specifically it unlocks, but you can play the original Metroid if you link Fusion and I believe it's if you link Fusion and Prime, and then you can also play as Samus in the Fusion suit from Metroid Fusion in Metroid Prime, which I did once, and it's pretty cool. It's really neat in 3D, actually. I didn't like the look of the suit too much on the Game Boy Advance, so that's neat. And then you've got things like Zelda 4 Swords Adventures, which I also played through with a couple of friends many, many summers ago now at this point, which was very enjoyable. You've got the Game Boy Advance hooked up to your screen, and so the 4 of you Link splits off into 4 different colors, and it's the 4 of you running around solving puzzles, fighting bad guys together. But when one of you decides to run off and go into a cave, the action transfers to your little Game Boy screen so that you can run around inside the cave while everybody else is waking up the guards by throwing pots at the wall. So
very cool.
It really works pretty well. Very cool.
Huh.
I'm gonna try that.
I wish they'd do that again. I'd like to play some more multiplayer Zelda.
I think the 3DS, like part of the Ambassador program, which is what you got if you bought like the 3DS around launch. They gave out a free 4 Swords Adventures for the 3DS, and I believe that it's supposed to be able to like connect with others sort of in a similar way, except they wouldn't go onto like a big TV screen. You just each have your own little screen. but I've never run into someone who has been a part of the ambassador program to play it with. And I refuse to play it alone because that defeats the entire purpose of the game. So there's that.
Yeah,
Also,
I don't know.
oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say another obscure thing while we're on the subject of Game Boy Advance SP, the wireless adapter. Did anyone ever hear about that?
Wireless adapter?
Which wireless adapter? Like,
For the Game Boy Advance SP was the one I had. I think it worked.
Is that for multiplayer gaming?
Yes. It was like a link cable, except like, that you would link two Game Boys together, but it was wireless. So it was like how the DS worked normally. you put on this little thing. You got it with like Fire Red. I don't know. I think you got it with Fire Red, Leaf Green, or Emerald. It came with it, and if you both had one, which my brother and I both did because we both got Pokemon. It basically, it was like how DSs work nowadays, where you could wirelessly communicate. You didn't need to have the cable plugged into both of them. Which, I mean, when you have a cable, it's kind of pointless because you're always going to be in the vicinity of someone who has one. The only way you're going to find someone else with a wireless adapter is if you coordinated this meeting. Yeah. And it didn't work much further than a cable. But, I mean, I thought it was the coolest thing ever when I was a kid. Because all of a sudden you didn't need to wire up your Game Boys together. You could, face other directions from each other, and you didn't have to be right next to each other.
Like you could be, in the car, and like someone's sitting in the front seat, someone's sitting in the back seat or whatever.
Right.
That's cool.
Right. But then the DS came out, and it was basically just that automatically.
Well, didn't the Game Boy Color have that like infrared port or something?
Yeah, but you didn't really use that.
And that's the thing that I was trying to remember while you guys were talking about this. And I think that I tried to do the infrared thing with a friend to trade some Pokemon. And if I remember correctly, we tried it for like 5 or 10 minutes, and then we're like, just use the cable.
Yeah, when they work, peripherals are some of the coolest things you can do with a video game system. I mean, there's all sorts of built-in stuff like, oh, look at the pretty graphics, oh, look at the internet capability that it's got. But throwing a peripheral on top of that, it feels special. It's unique. Like the microphone for the GameCube, I thought was the coolest thing because you have it for Karaoke Revolution. If you're playing the GameCube version. And that's lots of fun. And then you pick up a second microphone if you can, and then you can sing duets, which is also cool. I haven't had the chance to try it yet, but I've been wanting to. And then you plug in the dance pad that came with Mario DDR, which I played briefly. And then all of a sudden, you're like singing and dancing, like doing DDR and Karaoke Revolution at the same time because of these cool peripherals you have. And then when you're all done with it, you pop in Mario Party 6 and Mario Party 7, and then you plug a microphone, and then you're shouting commands at a tank to, launch, drop bombs and launch Goombas at people as they're trying to catch up with you and shoot you. Like, really cool stuff. But I love when peripherals work right and when they're interesting, and it's not just some sort of gimmick, but it's like, this enhances the gameplay.
Or you could be like me in Mario Party and play the fruit game where you shout the fruit and the other people have to get off of that fruit and it comes down, and you shout pineapple, and there are no pineapples. There are apples, but there are no pineapples. Which then essentially devolved into just us shouting random things into the microphone and figuring out and letting the game figure out which fruit that was.
Well, was it I just recently, I don't think it's on the site yet, but I edited the article for Laser Invasion for the NES, which had its own peripheral. It was basically the zapper, but it was like a laser controlled like helmet thing, I guess. And you basically would like look, instead of pointing the gun, you would like look where you wanted it to shoot, and you're supposed to go fire, and it would shoot. But according to Mark Friedman, the one who wrote the thing, he says that basically if you just made any noise, or if someone in the background made noise, it would fire. So,
well, it's a cool idea. They'll get to there eventually.
And that was always the fun part about the microphone games in Mario Party, was you hold down the button while you're speaking, and then you let go when you're done speaking. But if you're about to put in that command, like here's 5 cards and we shuffle them around, they've got pictures of fruit. Which fruit is on this card? And you're about to say orange, and then everybody else, as you're holding down the microphone button, starts shouting banana and pineapple and monkey and all sorts of things. And then the game gets confused, and it's like, did you say cheesecake? No! So it's fun to mess with people like that, too, when it's in a competitive situation.
Actually, was it an advertisement for the Xbox One? I can't remember. It was like a number of months ago, but it was like a dude was playing a Madden game, and then like somebody comes up behind him and is like, whoa, snap, LOL, and like the guy snaps the ball and like messed up his game.
That was an advertisement?
It was an advertisement, and like I'm like, you're advertising something that is the worst design decision ever. Like,
that sounds like a
approving
Microsoft
it.
campaign.
yeah, and like I don't know, it was just like, you are showing people why not to buy this, you guys.
I mean, that's
But no.
an unavoidable design flaw. I feel like I don't think you couldn't set it up anyway. I mean, you could turn off those settings, but if you were going to play with those settings, I don't think there's really a way, unless you get all the way down to the nitty gritty of specific voice recognition.
Yeah.
But you don't need to bring that up. This is certainly not a plus. You don't need people to be aware of that if you're going to sell your product.
Yeah, and actually, there was a thing that I also thought of during the Xbox One reveal, was again, the guy was, Xbox, turn on, Xbox, games, or whatever. I was like, I want to make a game that's released cross-platform, and at some point during the game, you have to say Xbox off. So, in order to beat the game, you're required...
They've actually done that. I think Matt Jonas, I want to say, reviewed a game for the DS on GameCola that had something really clever like that was built in as one of the puzzles. And I believe, not Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass, Zelda Phantom Hourglass for the DS, had a couple of funny things. And Spirit Tracks does as well. But where you're talking into the microphone and doing really clever things. Like I specifically remember some puzzle in some game at some point where I needed to, it was like make 2 triangles meet or something like that. So there was the one that I drew on the touch screen, and there was the one that was pictured in front of me, and to make them meet, you close the lid of the DS, and then you open it back up, and it's, you solve the puzzle! So some really cool stuff like that you can do.
Oh, I think we've talked a couple of times on the podcast about... there was an X-Men game for one of the Sega systems that it told you in the game, within the story of the game, you're dealing with a computer. And it's like you have to turn off the computer or like restart the computer. And you were supposed to restart the actual literal Sega system. And, of course, hilarity ensued when like more than 50% of the time you'd actually literally restarted it instead of doing the like soft restart.
Oh, no.
So like sometimes it was like, whoa, that was cool. And other times it's like, did it really just do that to me? I don't know.
I mean, cool things are cool when they work, and when they don't, you shouldn't bother.
Yeah.
If you can't get it to work, then it's not a cool thing. It's just obnoxious. I'm trying to think of a peripheral that I used that didn't work, like as intended, or it just was. I'm trying to think. There wasn't any that didn't work so much as I never used. Like there was one gamepad DDR thing that we got for like this. It was like supposed to be this outdoor. I don't know. It was called like Outdoor Adventure or whatever. It was one of a parent's scheme to try to get my brother and I to exercise more. And it had this pad that you like set up, and I think it was actually for the Wii, but you were supposed to use the GameCube ports for the thing, and you plugged it in, and like it was like a DDR pad, so you like tapped left, and the minecart went left, then you tapped right, and the minecart went left, and I mean it worked. And I think instead we ended up using our hands instead of our feet because it was easier. Because you could look where your hands were a lot easier than your feet. Because whenever we used our feet, we would always get off when we were going really doing a lot of stuff.
Oh,
so we
yeah.
just used our hands instead. But I mean, it worked, but it just wasn't. The game wasn't that fun.
Well, saying the same thing about the Nintendo Power Pad, any game that required you to like jump to actually like jump over something, I would just step off the pad. It's like,
It's a smart way to do it.
right? And like, well, I mean, granted that I'm also like 6, and they seem to have it like, calibrated for like Olympic,
Basketball player.
yeah, like Olympic gold medal winners. But I don't know, there were a few games, was it Street Cop or something that like required, and it was the worst thing because it made you use not only the like, you had to walk in order to make Street Cop walk, but you also had to like step on other pads to like throw a can or something. I don't know, it was just the worst game ever. I don't know, I had some fun with some of the games. There was what was it? Something super camp thing. I don't know. It was like a multi-game, two-player like race game that involved the power pad. But
Right.
that was the other thing I was going to say is that it was slippery. So like on carpet, as you're running, it's just like slowly getting out from under your feet.
hmm
Yeah.
That's what happened with this pad too. That's why we used our. That's another reason we used our hands.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of those exploits you can't get away with anymore, especially for the big consoles, with like Kinect and stuff. It watches you. And then
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure they'll figure out a way to rat you out and be like, nope,
Kinect.
better jump higher.
You can read your pulse apparently, which I still don't
Yeah.
buy. Someone's got to have to prove that to me because I don't buy that. According to
Yeah,
them,
they can't differentiate between like pineapple and apple when you're talking to it, but it can tell your heartbeat.
like it says that it can like read the minute details of your skin changing color when your blood pulses. I'm like you see like the pictures from the camera because sometimes it'll show you like this is what the Kinect sees.
Yeah.
And like it'll point and then it'll put little graphics like saying, oh look, this is where the Kinect says your hand is and stuff like that. And the picture quality, I mean, it's not bad, but it does not look good enough to be able to tell better than my eyes. Because I'm looking at my hand right now. It is not changing color when my blood is pulsing.
Well, I feel like, I mean, maybe if it's looking in like infrared or something, then it could
Maybe.
like sense that. But I don't think like literally my skin tone, especially when you start getting into like people with different skin tones,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've heard all sorts of conspiracy theories about how like the Xbox One requires you to have the Kinect on all the time so that like if you're watching TV, it can like track who's watching and whether they're smiling at an advertisement and stuff.
I saw one thing where it was like the Xbox registering like people in the room, like counting people,
Yeah.
and it was just the cat. It counted the cat as a person.
Close enough.
I guess back on the subject of peripherals, the Wii U gamepad is something. I guess we're just gonna go as we're progressing through the years. So we're skipping Wii because all the Wii had for peripherals was pieces of plastic.
Yeah, that was something that I noticed. My wife and I still have in the drawer a pair of lightsaber attachments for the Wiimote, so that we
But
could
it's
play one of
already a
the
lightsaber.
1.5 Star Wars games that they released, where you actually do lightsaber combat with the Wii. I guess it could work for Twilight Princess. But I just feel like that's the Wiimote itself is already a disaster waiting to happen when you're waving it around there with or without the strap, let alone attaching some flimsy piece of plastic to the end of it.
But like, yeah, everything before we go to the Wii, I guess like I can't think of any aside from the nunchuck, which came out like immediately, and the classic controller, which admittedly was a nice thing to have for eShop virtual console stuff. Those were like the only two peripherals that I can think of that were like important at all.
And I don't even count those as peripherals. Those are basic controllers in my mind. I mean, I think it's physically impossible for you to play some of the shop games, some of the virtual console games, without a classic controller. I seem to recall 1 or 2 games that I have saying you need a classic controller to play this game. And
They
like
all
I think in Metroid Prime 3, I think you need to have the nunchuck attached as well. I don't
they all
think you can play it
say
without.
it. They all say it, but I think the NES you can use the Wiimote sideways. They all say that you need the classic controller, but anything beyond the NES you do need it. But I don't think you need it for. You don't need it for NES games, because I remember playing through a bunch of Mega Man games and not using the classic controller.
Well, I mean, on the SNES they had like more buttons, so I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas the Wiimote sideways is essentially an NES controller. Like, funnily goes. But, like, they didn't ever plug, like, after they came out with the Nunchuck and the classic controller, they didn't ever come out with anything else to really plug into that, did they?
2 words. Wee baby.
I thought that was just like the same thing as another piece of plastic, except it was like a stuffed baby. But like you didn't even need the baby; you could just have the Wiimote, couldn't you?
It was a nominee for Best Peripheral a couple of years back on our year-end awards, and I don't think anybody actually voted on it except for me.
Was it?
Do you have it, or you just know of its existence?
I know of its existence, and that's good enough for me.
Like,
I think it's like a Wii wheel or something, where it's just something that you put your Wiimote in.
Oh, yeah. You just said, right, the Wii wheel, if that's what it's called for Mario Kart.
Mm-hmm.
That's a peripheral.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like they're all pieces of plastic that you put on. Whereas like with a GameCube, you had the mic that you plugged in, and it you did microphone stuff. And the Wii didn't really have anything like that to my knowledge.
Also, the Wii could still piggyback off of the GameCube. Any peripheral that worked for the GameCube, well, not any peripheral, but any of the ones that had any kind of crossover capability for plugging into the controller slot could theoretically be moved over to the Wii, right?
Right, but I don't think
Wii
any
plays
games.
GameCube games, so.
I don't think any Wii games ever took advantage of that, though.
True, but there were enough other gimmicky things for the Wii to take advantage of. I think it would have imploded on itself if it had any more toys to play with.
That's true, but I don't know. I feel like they came out with all that. They had that one little slot at the end, and they came out with the nunchuck, and a little while later they came out with the classic controller. And back then, I thought, oh, they're going to keep doing more things with this and see what came with it, and they just never did anything else except the Wii Motion Plus.
Yeah, I was just about to say, which one game took advantage of?
No, there were games.
You needed to play Skyward Sword.
Skyward Sword, you needed it. You needed it for I don't know if you needed it for all, but you needed a lot for Wii Sports Resort.
Right. Okay, 2 games. Which, incidentally, are the only 2 games anyone's ever owned for the Wii.
People had Wii Sports.
Okay, 3 games.
One of the best selling
But Wii
games
Sports
of all
comes
time.
with the console. That's not really a game that you actively go out and buy.
Best selling game on the Wii.
That's true. That's true.
And the second
But
one
no,
is Wii Play, which everyone bought because it came with a controller, not because everyone
True.
liked the game.
Very true.
Sorry, what were you saying?
I don't know. Anything Nintendo basically has become a Zelda machine for me. Like, I don't know. I play Donkey Kong. I don't really play Mega Man or Mario at all, so yeah,
Donkey Kong's
Zelda.
a good excuse too. I mean, that's how it's always been for me. I used my parents' Atari, and I got an NES when I was very young, and I played those. But then after that, after I fell in love with Mega Man, and after I fell in love with it was actually Metroid 2 was my first exposure to the Metroid series. I was on a road trip, borrowed somebody else's Game Boy and their game. I'm like, hey, this is kind of fun. So I came back and found Super Metroid and then fell in love with the whole Metroid series. So after those 2 games, every Nintendo console since that I have bought or requested be bought for myself has been because of a Mega Man game or a Metroid game on it. So it's totally fine for Nintendo to be a Zelda machine now, because I understand.
Super Nintendo was fantastic. There were so many publishers on there, so many really good games, and then N64 happened. And
it happened.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like, it had some really good Zelda games. Like, it had Ocarina of Time, and it had Majora's Mask. It had Donkey Kong 64. People liked the Mario game, but I can't think of anything else that was on there. And it didn't really last that long.
That was sort of my experience too. I mean, looking at my Super Nintendo collection, it's actually not all that big. I got all of the best games for the Super Nintendo, got spoiled, and then didn't really go after any of the other ones.
Yeah.
So I have like the best of the best, and then there's a bunch that I just haven't played. Whereas N64, every once in a while, I mean, I'll see at conventions and things, I'll see plenty of N64 games for sale, and I'll look them over, and I read reviews every once in a while, and there's just not really anything else that strikes my fancy. I've got like a dozen N64 games. It's Goldeneye and Perfect Dark. It's both Zeldas, Donkey Kong 64, like you mentioned, Mario Party 1, 2, 3, and then a couple of random things like Beetle Adventure Racing, which I think is actually my sister, and I need to give back to her. But then I got Banjo-Kazooie,
Okay.
which my brother-in-law is a big fan of, so I haven't... the last time I tried to play that game, I broke my N64 connector cord. I don't know what happened. I was just trying to plug in the game, and then all of a sudden the audio was still there, but the video shorted out. So I unplugged some cables and fiddled with things and unplugged it and plugged it back in. Didn't work. So I then plugged in another audio-video cable from, I think it was the Super Nintendo or something. That was because you can also hook up the Super Nintendo and the N64 with the same connector. And so I plugged that in. And then at this point, I'd switched out from Banjo-Kazooie to, I don't know why I'm going into this long story, but you're stuck with it now. And so I switched out Banjo-Kazooie for Mario Party 2, which I'm not that fond of. And I just like played all of the levels and unlocked everything. And then I turn it on because I'm like turning on and off the game to try and get the video to come back. And I just see this message saying, horrible error, all of your save data has been lost. So the moral of this story here is if your N64 ever stops displaying video but the audio is still there, when you're switching out cables and testing it, play a game that doesn't have a save feature.
All right.
So I don't know
Well,
how
okay, so that's the question. Like, Nintendo lost a lot of the big publishers. Is that because the PlayStation came out? I mean, is that where they migrated, or was it the Genesis?
Well, Rare migrated to Xbox, didn't they? I mean, that's
but that was after Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
Well,
So
but
that
I'm
wouldn't
just
have been as a
like that
result
was the
of-
beginning of it.
But no, Rare made some. I think it wasn't with the transition of the Nintendo 64. I think they made a couple GameCube games. They made Star Fox Adventures,
Okay.
and that one was not that well received, if I recall. But I was gonna say, I came onto the internet at a time where everyone was super nostalgic about the Nintendo 64. 'Cause it was, I think it was around the time I got my Wii, and it was so that would have been around 2007. But like everyone, when I got on the internet, I thought that it was always the prevailing belief with everyone that the Nintendo 64 was the greatest console of all time.
Well, I think 2007, if I'm not mistaken, was around the time that Nintendo 64, that thing, like, started getting around the internet. So that might be part of why was you just like hit it in that high spike.
Yeah, no, that's what I realized years later.
I
realized the Nintendo 64 is not that great because it had a lot, but I do now because of that.
Yeah,
I'm aware of all of the good, slightly obscure but still pretty good Nintendo 64 games. Like the one that comes to mind is Kirby 64 or Kirby and the Crystal Shards.
Hey.
Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Stadium.
Yeah.
Those are some other ones that are good. So there were a lot of good ones at the time. Problem is, I guess, the Nintendo 64, just out of all the consoles, just didn't hold up as well because of all of their 3D polygon stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that was just like what everyone was doing.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like the Super Nintendo, which had like, some 3D, but then also some this and some of that. Like everything. It felt like everything on the Nintendo 64 was trying to be Mario.
Yeah.
64.
Well, that is a good question. Sorry, I never owned a Nintendo 64, so I don't really know, and I'm not incredibly familiar with the games, but I don't think I've ever seen a 2D Nintendo 64 game, whereas...
Mischief Makers.
Mischief Makers? So there's one.
Yeah, I can't think of any others.
I can't think of anything that uses, like, sprites or anything. Everything uses... polygons.
Because I'm just thinking of like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which was on PlayStation, which was, I mean, it had some 3D in it, but it was largely 2D. And I don't think that was the only game like that. I mean, we were just talking about Rhapsody. I think that was completely 2D as well.
Yes.
Well, the thing about Nintendo is that they love gimmicks. Anytime they come out with a new console, it's, wow, what are we going to do with this?
Everything needs motion controls.
Well, no, even before that. So the N64 is, wow, we can go into 3 dimensions. This is great. Let's make everything in 3D. And then the GameCube came along. I like the GameCube a heck of a lot more because 3D is kind of passé. You can use it if you want to, but you don't have to. There's all sorts of other stuff you can do. Have fun with the peripherals. And then the Wii comes along and says, oh, wow, motion controls. We knew anything with it. Everything had motion controls. Then the Wii U comes along, and so far it looks like you can use the motion controls if you want, but they're not integrated into every single part of the game experience. So they get really excited about all their new toys, and then they kind of ease off and say, okay, this is something that we can use as part of the game if we want to.
Yeah.
It worked the best with the DS though, because like it was, the dual screen and the touch screen. Like, I mean, not every game uses the touch screen excessively, but it worked. It had with the menus, like it had a very easy thing that you could set it up to do. Like it could just be extra space. You could do touch. You could have it so that you had like a little touch menu. There were lots of simple things you could do with it. Whereas like with motion controls, it had to be a defining gameplay feature if you were going to include it, because it was so, I guess, it was just so difficult to program that sort of thing well that if you were going to do it, you might as well go all the way.
So where do they go from here? I mean, the Wii U
tablet.
controller has, well, I mean, it technically is a tablet essentially, isn't it? I mean, it's got the touchscreen, it's got the microphone, it's got the motion controls.
I hear works well for like everyone except me. Like, and I don't mean like that in a design sort of thing, but like mine doesn't has a really hard time connecting to my Wii U. And I have a feeling it's just me, and I've like asked around the house and stuff. And I think it's because our security system has this constant wireless interface signal going out to check our windows and doors to make sure that things aren't open and stuff. We think that's interfering with the signal. So it doesn't. I have to be like right next to it, and even then, it doesn't always quite work. But for everyone else, it works amazingly. So I can't really fault it for that. But it seemed to work really well, and I think like with the Wii, everything was like party games because that was the easiest thing you could do motion controls with. And I feel like the Wii U might do that, but instead the Wii U is actually like the peripheral. It's because the peripheral is good for motion controls from a conceptual standpoint instead of it's like with the Wii, the best thing you could make the motion controls do was a series of party games. For the Wii U, the best way to make party games is to use the tablet, if that makes sense. Because all that the asymmetrical stuff, like the Nintendo Land, which is essentially just a collection of little mini games, but it is so much fun. Nintendo Land is the best included with the system game I've ever played. It's just so much fun. The Metroid game, the Luigi's Mansion game is the most. You feel like an evil mastermind when you're the ghost because you're like creeping up on these people and they don't know where you are and but they can their controllers vibrate when you get close to them. But like that happens even like if you're getting close to them, but there's a wall in between you, so you can like freak them out when you're actually nowhere near them and not in any danger of being attacked by them. Because if they shine their flashlight on you, then you get caught. So you can get like really close to them and not be any danger, but still freak them out. It's so much fun because you feel like you're in complete control of the situation, even though it's really well balanced, and you just feel amazingly sinister. It's just so much fun. And I feel like if we could get an entire game where it wasn't, they could flesh it out as a Mario Party type thing, it could be really fun.
I have to backtrack for a second. I'm looking at my backloggery now, where I've got my full list of N64 games handy right in front of me, and I made a couple of glaring omissions. N64 is also another like party game kind of system, multiplayer specifically. We talked about GoldenEye, but the sports games the racing games specifically, and the Star Wars games. Because you've got Mario Tennis, Mario Kart 64. In my mind, that's still the definitive Mario Kart. And then you've got Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, Shadows of the Empire, the first Rogue Squadron game. So there's... And then, of course, Paper Mario for people who like Paper Mario. Star Fox 64, I don't know if we mentioned. And then Cruisin' USA, the arcade game that everybody loves. They made a port of that.
Really?
As well, yeah. And then I'm curious to try it. I haven't played it yet. The World Is Not Enough, which is another James Bond game, which I'm sure is not going to be anything like GoldenEye. But it's been on my list for a while. I have it. So I'm curious to see what it's like with no preconceived notions that it's going to be anything like GoldenEye, which I think is what's ruined any James Bond game ever, is that initial hurdle, regardless of how good or bad the game might be, that initial hurdle of, well, it's got to be like GoldenEye because it's got James Bond.
Well, what makes it like GoldenEye other than being able to play 4-player multiplayer where you like slap people and kill them in one hit?
I think the key thing that makes GoldenEye specifically so endearing is that the multiplayer, specifically the multiplayer, is so easy to pick up.
Yeah.
And so easy to learn, and so challenging to master, which is just good game design in general.
Yeah.
But there's such a fun variety of weapons. You've got everything from the slappers to the tiny pistols to the golden gun to the ridiculous clob, the RCP-90, and the grenade line. I love the explosive; those are my favorite. But several different flavors of similar concepts of weapons, and then just good, solid level layouts that lend themselves to good skirmishes.
Yeah, that's true. No, they definitely had some creative stuff. The proximity mines, that was always a good one.
Yes.
Just like learn that your friend is sitting inside like a air vent or something. Just place some proximity mines there.
No. Better yet, lay a proximity mine on an ammo box, run over the ammo box to pick it up, and when it respawns, the mine is still there, but it doesn't show up.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, look, ammo box, boom!
Yeah. No, I definitely played some GoldenEye in my day. I think that was pretty much the only game, because again, I played it at a friend's house who lived around the corner, and they weren't really video game people. Like, I think I've mentioned on the podcast before that I lent them my copy of Final Fantasy III, and like a week later, I was like, hey, so how you enjoying the game? And they're like, oh, it was pretty good. I've been playing on your save, flying the ship around. Like they literally did not touch the game. They just loaded up my save and flew the airship around. And it's a pretty good game apparently when you do that.
Actually, that's one of my favorite parts of the game is flying the airship around and not actually playing the rest of it.
But no, the one thing that we did definitely play a lot of was GoldenEye. And I think they tried playing one of those Star Wars games that you mentioned, but they don't even know anything about Star Wars. So they had no clue what they were doing.
Isn't that like on an American citizenship test now? Like questions about Star Wars?
I think an interesting thing about games is like replayability has, I don't know if it's always been, I feel like now it's something more that games strive to do. Because if you buy, I don't know how it's different now than it was back, in the days of the NES and stuff. So when you had an NES or an SNES, you were kind of stuck to the one game. So if it was, it didn't really matter if it was replayable to a certain extent because you were stuck with it because it was your game. But now on the other side, we live in, where you can get $51 games on your phone for the same price as a big game on your console.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much replayability is a factor in any point. But I always found that people try to artificially come up with replayability through like, oh, you can go back and collect all these little things, and that makes the game more replayable. Or, you could try to go for a better time. And I always found that even in games that include that, games that are the most replayable are the ones that you can just do things in, and it's just fun to be in and play without any other incentive.
Yeah, I've always thought that... I'm sorry, Kate, I cut you off.
No, it's okay.
Darn right it's okay. Kidding. No, I've always thought that the best kind of replay value is extending the game logically, just doing more of the same thing you've been doing the rest of the game. Every once in a while, sure, throw in some sort of mini game or some sort of like awkward challenge that you wouldn't normally do yourself. But achievements, I mean, that's why I usually don't even bother with achievements, because it's not a meaningful extension of the gameplay. It's play Mega Man 9 3 times in the same day. Like, okay, maybe I'll do that if I really love it, but why? What bragging rights does that really grant me? Beat the game without taking damage, that's a different story, but even that is so obscene. It's like, that is a personal challenge in my mind of, I am so good at this game that I can even beat it without getting hit. Not, well, I'm not very good at this game because I can't get the achievement for not getting hit.
I feel like in that situation it would be better if it was just something like you just got a reward for doing that, rather than because when you put it as an achievement, there's like sort of this assumption that you should be able to do this and you shouldn't stop playing this game until you've done this. This game isn't true with them. Whereas you could say get a special ending screen if you beat the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what replay value is to me. It's finding new things in the game if you replay it. It's unlocking bonus dungeons. Give me an alternate ending, give me more story, give me bonus material, give me something additional to do with the gameplay. I mean, I look at Mega Man X Command Mission, I beat this year. I can't really say recently anymore because it's been several months. And that's a game that I think did a really good job with the replay value, because you can simply go through the game and beat it. Or you can dabble around with some of the side stuff. They have force metal recipes, so you grab different items, some of which can only really be found by grinding, and then you put them together and combine them and come up with new items which make the game even easier or more fun, or introduce something different that's not just, oh, you found all of these items, great, you can check it off the list. It's no, you get something that changes the flow of the gameplay slightly. Some of the stuff, it's like by the time you can get it, you really don't need it anymore, but the thought is still there. And then you've got the bonus dungeon where you've got the Nine Tails clan, where you're fighting, I think it's 9 bosses, each of which has, it's like a kitsune kind of a creature, and each one has an extra tail than the last one did, and they all get stronger and crazier, and it's like you don't need to beat them to fight the game. In fact, it's harder than the final boss, but it's fun to see that additional challenge because there are different new bosses, and you get to unlock a couple things like, you beat one of the bosses and then you go into the next room and you've got more artwork, concept art that you can view in your sky room, and so you can collect those things. So no, there's really not a point, it doesn't expand the gameplay when you're collecting artwork and figurines of the different characters that you can view, but it's something new that adds to the game experience. It isn't just a checklist which you could make on your own piece of paper and say, oh, I beat the game 17 times in a day, backwards, not wearing my helmet, with my eyes closed. It's like you can do that on your own.
Yeah.
Well, how much of that do you think, current game designers are influenced by MMOs and the fact that, they're constantly uploading new...
Oh.
I mean, or even just Facebook games where new content is expected, so even if it's not really supposed to have high replayability, how does a console game fight that?
Compete with that?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Actually, from a indie designer standpoint, this is something I've seen with a few things where games that are existing indie games, they just release an update that actually has either more content or another play mode, or something else that it's a DLC effectively for their indie game. I mean, it's free, if you already bought the game, but it gives more people a reason to buy it, and it gives the people who bought it, a reason to come back and play it again or whatever.
I guess the major difference when you're, comparing an MMO to a console game is that with an MMO, they have to keep generating replayability, or, replayability is, I don't know if you necessarily could say that's replayability. It depends on how you define it. The difference is that that's a subscription-based thing. So continuing to play the game is an important part of that game generating revenue. Whereas, you take a console game, it doesn't matter, if you play it for 50 hours or for 5 minutes, as soon as you've bought it, and that money has gone to the people it's going to go to.
True, but in a way, it does matter, because if you know a publishing company or if you know a game franchise that's renowned for giving you a really good game experience, like if you don't really care about content necessarily, you just want to get your money's worth out of this game, and you know that this kind of game is going to give you hours and hours and hours of gameplay, then you'll probably want to buy another one by the time you're done with it. I mean, that's not the only reason, but you look at, and I think Kate can speak to this, the Elder Scrolls games are massive.
Yep.
They're huge, and you can just get yourself completely lost in them. So you have one game that, maybe you got it on discount, cost you $20 or something, and so you're playing one Elder Scrolls game, and then you're set for a year, and you love this thing, and you're playing it to death, and then you are so psyched when the next one comes out that you're willing to blow $60-$70 on it.
Or there's also, I don't know if any of you guys play Assassin's Creed, they've tried to expand the brand by going multi-platform, and that there will be challenges that you can compete on with the computer, like go onto Facebook, or there's a website right now for their current game where you go and you do tasks, and then finishing those tasks will do something in the console game and vice versa. So like trying to expand or just expand your playing experience by going across platforms, which could be really well done.
Though. I'm like, I want to buy a game. I want to sit down and play it. I don't want to be constantly connected to the internet. I don't want to have to log in somewhere else. I don't want to have to sign up for a mailing list for me to, get all the updates and stuff. I don't want to buy figurines in a store. I just want to sit down and play the game that I bought. Leave it alone.
Because, console, the argument that I always had when I was, when you say, oh, console versus PC, oh, PC is so much better. The argument I always had is that PC might be better, but it's more complicated, and there's more stuff that I have to do to get it to work, and there's more things that can go wrong, and I'd rather have a less good experience that I know I can get to work every time, rather than a more powerful but yet less reliable experience that I'm going to have to go on the internet and look up the answer to my obscure technical problem. But as time goes on, consoles are getting more complex and stuff like that, and I'm getting to the point where it's like, this isn't any more difficult than just using my computer. I might as well use my computer, which I've used for several years now and kind of know how it works, rather than this new console that requires a day one software update just to work, and all this wacky internet stuff that I have to get set up now. It's a major part of playing this game.
Well, do you think that the console producers are trying to get us all to the point where we're just buying essentially what are gaming computers, but with their fancy logo?
with a Wiimote to control it, check my email,
Yeah.
Swag the Wiimote, check my email.
Yeah.
On-screen
Have
clicker.
Mario read out your email.
Sorry, I'm just thinking of any of the times that trying to input text on the Xbox using the controller. Oh.
Well, that's why you get the peripheral keyboard,
Yeah. I'm not
For
spending
accessories.
any more money on that thing.
To go back to replayability, though, there's this one type of replayability. I don't know how you would define this. And I think it might be something, because I don't know if I've ever really experienced it since I was a little kid, but in Super Mario Sunshine, I would just play the game, and maybe it was to your point, Jetty, of just, them playing Final Fantasy III and just flying the airship around. But, I played the game, and I got, mostly through. I beat the main game, but, I got to the point where I was just tired of going to try to collect all the shine sprites. But what I would do is I would just go to each of the levels, find the highest point in each of those levels, and then just jump off of it to the lowest point that, wasn't a death pit. And that was just entertaining for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can really quantify it. That's something that you could really... Is that something that you're just a kid and you don't have priorities? You don't think you just spend time with a game even though you have other games to play? Because the same thing happened with Pokemon, and this isn't Pokemon, because Pokemon Red and Blue, they were very focused on the whole gotta catch 'em all sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas after that game, the gotta catch 'em all kind of fell to the wayside. It was like, instead of being the main focus of the game, it was just like, oh, you can do that if you want. That's an option. That's a goal. Beating the, Elite Four is a goal. And then as the games went on, more little goals came up from that. Like in the third generation, there was like this whole contest system that you could try to win. And then Pokemon breeding became a thing, and raising the perfect team became another goal. And as time went on, it was like there just became all these different ways to play the game. And when you were done, there wasn't any part of the game that said, oh, you get this if you breed the perfect team, or you get a whole bunch of stuff if there was no one telling you after the initial time you're introduced to it, oh, go do the contests and be the best at the contests. But it was there and part of the game, so it wasn't shoved down your throat.
Yeah.
But it was definitely there. When to beat the game, there was still just stuff to do.
That is kind of interesting to consider after, like Nathaniel was talking about Mega Man with its challenges or whatever they call them, to look at basically the same thing, but instead of being like, hey, here it is spelled out for you, go do it, it's just like, yeah, it's here if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, you could, it would tell you about it. It would say oh, hey, here's the contest thing, and it might make you they might suggest that you do the tutorial thing if you wanted to, and you could skip the tutorial thing, if you were replaying the game or something. But you could, after that, you could just leave and not come back until you've already beaten the game. And it was a completely different thing. The moves had these different categories, so you could essentially train a Pokemon to be a contest Pokemon, which wouldn't necessarily make it good in battle. Because suddenly only thing that matters is moves, and type advantages and level don't matter anymore, because that was separate from that system. I just think it was interesting. That was an interesting way to go about it, because if it's not your thing, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
And there's no punishment. The game doesn't say, if you, at the end credits, if you had played more contests, you would have gotten the better ending.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just that's the kind of replayability that's. I don't even know if is it really replayability, because you're still playing the game.
Yeah.
You're not restarting anything. It's just another part of the game that you're doing.
Continued gameplay as opposed to new gameplay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it probably depends on the type of player you are too. I mean, I know some people only play for 100% completion and for achievements and things. Me, I'd rather play for the story, or in the case of Chrono Trigger, where there are 10 different endings that you can get.
Yeah.
That's a lot of replayability. Or there's Skyrim. So.
Yeah, Chrono Trigger is a great example, because all of the optional material builds on the story at the same time building on the gameplay. Yes. Because you've got an extra character that you can add to your arsenal, who, whether or not you have him in your party, changes the ending slightly.
Yeah.
You've got the mini games at the fair. You can amass an army of cats at your house, which is totally, there's no need for it, but it's fun. And again, it adds to the ending a little bit, depending on which ending you get. And then going back and replaying, it's okay, I am exercising the New Game Plus feature to be strong enough at any point before the end of the game to be able to take on the final boss. So that also switches up the game experience too, because these other guys who were kicking your butts before are now pushovers, and you're using all of these crazy fancy weapons. When I replay Chrono Trigger, and it's been several years, what I do is I try and amass as many weapons, as many items, equipment as possible. I'm trying to stock up and get all of them on my one save game up to 99 all across the board. There's no achievement for this. There's no purpose for it whatsoever. It's just a fun challenge. And of course, there's ones where you can only get one of them per game. So, it's not like I'm going to be picking up 70 rainbow swords in a single playthrough. So some of them just probably not going to happen before the game's battery burns out. But it's still fun to see, really how many load swords can I accumulate. And it's just little fun things like that. And then you've got the additional replay value of multiple party members who, in addition to having different abilities, and you can switch them out over the course of the game, say different things. They give you different story. Like when you first show up into, 65 million BC, and you meet Isla and you meet all the dinosaurs, depending on which characters you have in your party, when she shows up, like if you have Robo the robot, she's like, "What are you, big metal tin can?" Or actually, she wouldn't even know tin can. She's like, "What are you?" And he's like, "I'm a robot." And she says, "Raw boot, what this rubbish?" And you get this fun little exchange. Whereas if you don't have them in the party, if you have the frog, then there's different dialogue there. So you've got different gameplay and different story, and it really works to replay the game because there's so many little things still to discover, in addition to whatever fun you might have, blasting everything with your highest level crazy spells at levels where you normally wouldn't have even heard of these abilities. So that's a good game for replay value.
Just to clarify, when you beat Chrono Trigger, you keep it's one of those games where it sends you back to the beginning, but you keep all of your levels, right?
If you do a new game plus, yes, you have that ability. And actually, I'm at the point. One of the things I love doing is I've replayed the game so many times and gotten Chrono so strong that I can walk into the game, I can wave to the princess, and walk straight into the teleporter alone with Chrono and take down Lavos.
That's fabulous.
Well, because when you do the New Game Plus, isn't it that you can go to Lavos basically whenever you feel like it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, there's the teleporter at the Millennial Fair now has this little sparkle, which will instantly take you to the final boss. So you can do that at any time, in addition to the normal methods that the game offers you later on, where you can fly your time machine back to fight him. But probably you're not strong enough to do that during the first playthrough.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can get different endings depending on where you are within the story. So like if you stop before a major boss battle, the game will end with one of the characters going off to fight the evil mage, and you get to see that cutscene, whereas you would have actually played through it had you continued. So it's a fantastic game. I highly recommend it to any and everyone.
I got to the part where the flying fortress came up, and all of a sudden I was doing really well level wise and everything, and I got to the flying fortress and that boss came up, and all of a sudden I was just getting wiped out in 2 turns. I don't know what happened.
I thought you weren't actually supposed to do it as soon as it came up. I thought there was other stuff you were supposed to do. I don't remember.
Wait, which flying fortress are we talking about? Are we talking about the Black Omen?
I'm talking about.
Are we talking about Dalton's?
It's the one. It's the one where it follows you throughout time. If you use your time machine, it's still there.
Yeah, that's the Black Omen, and that is supposed to be super powered, challenging.
Okay.
So
I got there and I felt like I had done something wrong, and then I stopped playing the game, and I've never picked it up again. Just not because I got frustrated with it, but just because I never got back around to it. I went on to other things.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the game up to that point, and then I got to that point, I was just like, did I do something wrong? And I tried to go to other places, and I kept being under-leveled, it seemed.
Yeah, well, the Black Omen is the last thing you do in Chrono Trigger before the final boss. You want to make sure that you've gone to every other time period and done all of the other side quests before you even set foot in there.
Okay.
But one of the nice things, if you have it for DS, they just re-released it a couple years ago. They added new features with dungeons and things where it's a really good place to grind if you don't feel like playing it through, 99 times to get your 99 levels. So if you have a DS, that might be a good way to pick it up.
Interesting. What I did with Chrono Trigger that worked really well, the beginning of the game, I go into Guardia Forest, and I grind to get to level 3 or 4, maybe 5, and you do not need to grind for the entire rest of the game. Chrono alone is strong enough to handle anything else that the rest of the party might not be so good with. So just level up, spend 20 minutes, half an hour at the very beginning of the game. You have the entire rest of the game to just enjoy the story as it comes at you without slowing down to grind.
And it's totally worth the ride.
Yeah.
Fantastic story.
So yay, Chrono Trigger. I don't remember the last time I played that. That's exciting.
All right, so what are your feelings about Chrono Cross?
I own it. I played years and years ago. I think when it first came out, I only just acquired a PlayStation 2. And was a Nintendo-only guy prior to that. So this is my first opportunity to actually play something of that length. But I played 15 minutes of it at a friend's house around the time when it first came out, and sort of like we were saying about GoldenEye earlier, how every other James Bond game fails because it's GoldenEye. I played 15 minutes and said, this isn't Chrono Trigger. This in no way, shape, or form resembles anything I know about Chrono Trigger. I don't like it. And that was one of the reasons probably why I never bothered to go after a PS2, despite there being, or a PS1 or whatever the heck system it's for, despite there being like various Mega Man games on those systems as well. Like, I think that might have tipped it enough for me to say, oh, I want to get this, I want to play this, because it didn't even resemble Chrono Trigger. I'm like, you can't use the word Chrono in the title and have it have nothing to do with Chrono. I was angry at the anime Chrono Crusade because it had nothing to do with Chrono Trigger.
Okay.
So I guess Chrono is just off limits in the title if it's not Chrono Trigger.
I don't know if anyone remembers this because it was just like this weird little thing that never ended up going anywhere, but Sonic Chronicles, The Dark Brotherhood, which was, I believe, given the name Sonic Chronicles, it was supposed to be a first in a series, was this Sonic the Hedgehog RPG. It was interesting.
I know of its existence, but it would be better if we had Stu Jip or Matt Jonas on the podcast.
I played through it, and one of these days I should probably play through it again and review it. But aside from all the other stuff, which I could talk about, but the main thing is, like, it did the thing where, like, once you beat the game, you went back to the beginning of the game, and you kept all of your levels and stuff. But, like, that didn't work for that game because, like, I don't know, I guess in Chrono Trigger there are lots of battles that you can just skip, whereas this game had a lot of battles that were mandatory at the beginning, but they were just so tedious because you just overpowered everything, and it felt like wasted time trying to get back to a point where you didn't kill everything in one hit. And I don't know, did I ever make the game feel tedious? If you went back in New Game Plus and played through everything on such a higher level?
Well, one of the things, going back to Chrono Trigger, because this is the only game that I really have any extensive experience New Game Plussing, is you've got a wide range of equipment. So what I would do after a while, and I got tired of whacking every single boss in 1 to 2 hits, I would actually equip whatever equipment I was supposed to have at that point in the game, so I wasn't completely overpowered. And I even got to the point where I started sort of delaying, like, I'm just going to equip a mop, and I'm going to whack things with a mop for a while, because that does, like, no damage, and that restores some of the challenge. So I think there's something to be said, whether or not you're doing a New Game Plus, of implementing your own challenge in games. I mean, that's one of the things that keeps Mega Man so fresh for me, is that I will challenge myself to play through an entire stage using only one of the special weapons. I will challenge myself to fight the bosses only with the Buster. You know, there are various things that you can do that are not mandatory. You don't get an achievement for them. There's no real reason to do them, but they continue to add to the replay value because there's still a fun challenge for you, and there's something else you can do in the game world if you want to keep playing the game, but you don't want it to be the exact same experience it's been every time before.
See, another, like, sort of like that is also Pokemon. You can do that, and I guess that's another, you know, quote, replayability type thing, is the game that facilitates, you know, making your own challenges, which I don't know how you would plan for that. But, like Pokemon, you can do, like, the big thing is the Nuzlocke, where you catch the first Pokemon that you see in a route, and if you make it faint, then you don't get to catch it, and you don't get to catch anything else. And if your Pokemon faints, then it dies, and you can never use it again.
Oh, that's harsh, but I love it.
And so, like, and there are tons of people who do this, and people will, like, make comics, like, sort of making a story based off of them going through the game, these rules. So, like, you know, their Pokemon will die when they died in the game. But it's an interesting way to challenge yourself. And, it, you know, in certain respects, like, you know, you have to do a lot of grinding to make this work, because the game is designed around your Pokemon should faint at some point. So you have to spend a lot of time grinding. But, like, it works because, like, if it was something that the game gave you itself, then I don't feel like it wouldn't work, because then it would just be like, oh, well, the only way to do this is to, you know, you have to grind. Why would you make a game mode like that? But since it's, like, player created, it, like, those flaws are now a personal challenge in certain respects.
Well, sort of along those lines, I don't remember. I must have linked to something that was linked to on GameCola or something like that. But I found a blog called Alice and Kev, which looks at The Sims 3, and it does sort of an experiment with another open-ended game where normally, you build a nice house and you have your Sims running around, having careers, making babies, making friends, making cakes, and whatever other things that you can make in life. And have a nice little home building simulator. What this person chose to do was they put a very, like, the most unpleasant sim human being that you can possibly imagine to be around, and have him have a daughter, and they're homeless people living in a park.
Oh.
Like, instead of building a home and they live inside it, they structured the plot of land to look like or to function as a public park, and these two sims just live in the park without a true home, and then sort of sponge off their neighbors. And it's just really interesting to see how the Sims, who have their own AI, you can control them to a certain extent, but you can just let them run wild. And to see what these homeless Sims go off and do when you just let them loose in this playground, which is not the way the game was necessarily intended to be played, but it's still possible. It's an option because it's open-ended enough. It's just, here is your game world, here are the tools that you have fun with it. So it's been really interesting and sort of sad sometimes. It's sort of funny, depending on the situation, but it's been a really interesting read so far.
Yeah, I read the whole thing. It's pretty cool. And I tried doing that once with my Sims, but I'm too much of a control freak to let them go that wild.
No. But no, I think this has been a pretty good podcast. I would like to thank everyone for being here. Nathaniel, Kate, Joe, Anna. Thank you guys.
You're welcome.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. If the listeners aren't listening on our actual internet website, we do have an actual internet website. Please go to GameCola.net if you enjoyed this podcast. And if you're not listening to this on YouTube, you can go to our YouTube channel, gc.net. You can also follow us on Twitter. We're GameCola. Find us on Facebook. We're also on Tumblr now, GameCola, gamecola.tumblr.com.
Tumblr's cool.
Yeah, I like it. We're also on iTunes. If you want the latest podcast update, you can go on iTunes. You can review us highly. Give us a 5, please. If you're not going to give us a 5, then we're not on iTunes.
Get out!
But yeah, I think that's everything. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for everyone being here.
Welcome.
Yay.
Good night.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
And everyone died.
The end.
And
Yeah. Do-do-do-do-do-do. Thank you, Joe.